In December 2023, Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries started a discussion around potential legislation that is targeting our ability to keep certain reptile species as pets. As passionate individuals who cherish these incredible creatures, it's imperative for us to stay informed about the developments that may affect our ability to keep the species we love. After listening to the entire December 2023 Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries meeting regarding this proposed legislation, I feel like it's important for everyone to have the ability to also watch for themselves, hear the key points, and most importantly, hear exactly what was discussed straight from the source. I will be offering commentary throughout on some of the key points that I feel that I have enough experience and knowledge on to discuss further. My name is Julianne Voisin, and I was born and raised in South Louisiana. I've lived here my whole life. I have always had a passion for nature and our native animals. I am also a sub-permanent wildlife rehabber and work under another local wildlife rehabber here in my parish. And I specifically take in and rehab and release a lot of injured native turtles. So I'm very passionate about these animals. On top of that, I am a reptile keeper and educator. And I do things like classes with animals, presentations, festivals, fairs, and other educational events with my reptiles. I own many species of reptiles, several different kinds of snakes, turtles, tortoises, lizards, including an Argentine red tegu named Chili, which is one of the proposed species that would be banned. You're about to hear some clips from the Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries meeting in December. The first bit is going to be the presentation by Carrie Lejeune, who is a biologist that is putting forth these proposed changes. I'm going to let her roll through her presentation with minimal interruptions so that we can hear her out, because her intentions are actually great. There's a lot in this bill that needs to happen and that's long overdue. It's just we need to figure out a way to potentially come up with some sort of meeting in the middle when it comes to reptile ownership regulations.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I'm Carrie Lejeune. I'm the state herpetologist for the Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, and I'm here today to present a notice of intent for some amendments to our reptile and amphibian regulations. Okay, we're proposing revisions throughout Part 15 of Title 76, most of which of these are clerical in nature, and really just adding the necessary clarification to our existing language. For this presentation, I'll be focusing on the key major amendments listed here in regards to commercial and recreational collection of native turtles, also permitting and reporting on department-owned and managed lands, requirements for commercial licenses. We have two that are specifically related to reptiles and amphibians, the collector's license and the wholesale retail dealer's license, and then also adding some restrictions for non-native reptile and amphibian species and our restricted snakes. Restricted snakes are defined as any constrictor snake over 8 feet in length, and then all venomous snake species. But before we dive into the actual NOI regulations, I really wanted to provide you with a little background and hopefully a clear understanding of where we currently stand in relation to these items and where we would like to go or need to go. Okay, so we have 32 native turtle species and subspecies in the state with one established non-native, the Florida softshell. We have 19 species of greatest conservation need as listed in our Louisiana Wildlife Action Plan. State Wildlife Action Plans serve as blueprints for conserving fish and wildlife resources and preventing species from becoming endangered. Wildlife action plans for all states must be revised every 10 years with the upcoming revision deadline of 2025. We do plan to add turtle species to that within that revision and to our species of greatest conservation need list. Okay, we also have prepared a comprehensive turtle conservation plan for the state. We have sent that plan out to partners for review. We are in the process of reviewing comments from those partners, and we're hoping to have a final draft ready for by March 2024. And this turtle conservation plan is really to develop a strategic approach for us to conserve and manage our native turtles. We have 7 species that are federally and state listed as threatened or endangered. 3 species are proposed for federal listing. That's the alligator snapping turtle, the western chicken turtle, and the Pearl River map turtle. 5 species are currently restricted from commerce: box turtles, alligator snapping turtle, and the razorback musk turtle. 23 species, are protected by CITES, and that's an international agreement to help regulate and monitor trade better in certain wildlife species to help prevent threats to their survival. Several species of turtles have been uplisted in 2023. earlier this year, and those are listed here. And that just means that there's more protections put in place for those species when it comes to export permit applications. Turtles are among the most imperiled vertebrate groups in the world. In a case study conducted by Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, 57 species of turtles in the U.S., approximately 40% of those are threatened or imperiled. There's about 75% of turtle species in the U.S. are found in the Southeast. And as you can see by the map here, our region ranks only second to Southeast Asia. So that really makes our region important for conservation of these resources, but also makes our turtle species more vulnerable to trade. Also making turtle species vulnerable is their life history traits. So they have a long lifespan. They can live for decades in the wild, and some well over 50 years. It takes several years, some over 10 years to reach maturity and be able to reproduce. They may only nest 1 to 2 times a year and may only lay less than 10 eggs at a time for some species. Okay, high adult survivorship is very important given these life history traits in order to ensure that these populations persist viably on the landscape. There also is a host of threats that turtles face. Habitat loss and degradation is really a primary threat, and it's causing significant declines in these species. Also, high nest and juvenile predation are issues that in some areas where we're conducting studies on riverine habitats, we're seeing on sandbars where a lot of these turtles lay their eggs in their nests, we're seeing nearly 100% predation rate. And so we're really getting 0% recruitment into those populations. Disease is also a factor and something that we kind of monitor and keep an eye on. Ranavirus is a deadly virus that has been detected in some turtle species, and also in the Cuban tree frog in New Orleans, which is a non-native species that is established in the state. The turtle Fraser virus is a newly documented virus that has been discovered in Florida, and the cause for mass die-offs of soft-shell turtles, red-eared sliders, and also common snapping turtles. We have detected that virus in Louisiana in several populations, and so we're just really working to monitor that, and also the chytrid fungus. So that has not been detected in the state. It is a deadly, it causes a deadly disease to amphibians, but there is some suspects that it could be transmissible by reptiles, and so we just don't know. We're transporting these animals around from state to state, and the disease issue is really significant. Also, introduced invasive species, so feral hogs, they prey on turtle nests and juveniles. Road mortality, pollution, oil spills are also threats to these species. And then we also have multiple publications have been put out there that have shown that any level of commercial harvest is really unsustainable for turtles, given their life history traits and just the myriad of threats that they face, especially if that harvest has been largely unregulated. Also, due to the demand from other countries for turtles, illegal collection and trade is an expanding issue. Some countries have nearly depleted their turtle populations, with some of those extinct. And so it really increases the pressure for turtles to come from our region and other areas to supply the demand for the pet trade for medicinal purposes or for food. Okay, illegal trafficking, as I mentioned, of turtles is a global issue that is occurring here in the U.S. and the Southeast. These are just a few headlines from recent illegal trafficking cases. And some trafficking cases outside of Louisiana involve turtles captured in Louisiana, and in some cases, turtles are captured in other states with tighter restrictions and then transported to Louisiana to be sold illegally. Currently, we have multiple federal investigations occurring in the state right now involving our native turtles. Okay. So for commercial and recreational collection, it has largely been unregulated and unrestricted in our state. We have insufficient reporting. We have multiple regulatory loopholes. The numbers of turtles stockpiled in local ponds has been concerning. We know it's occurring. We don't know to what degree. but that has been due to these regulatory loopholes. Also, due to the new CITES uplistings and reports from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on wild take by Department of Ag turtle farms, over 87,000 individuals have been taken from the wild, and this number is only reflected in 4 of the current 19 licensed turtle farms. All southeastern states have ended commercial turtle harvest, and they've added restrictions to their recreational take. So we are the last state to really curb our commercial turtle harvest. And so the trend in the number of reptile and amphibian wholesale retail dealer licenses has been increasing in recent years. Over 60,000 turtles have been reported taken from the wild through these licenses and reported via our trip tickets reporting system. Also, due to the definition of fish in our Titles 56 statutes, wholesale retail seafood dealers, commercial fishermen, and fresh product licensees can harvest or purchase native reptiles and amphibians, which is an issue for monitoring what is being taken from the wild or trade level for these species. And also current scientific data that we've collected internally, but we've also issued grants to partners to collect, currently collecting data on some of these species. And preliminary results are showing that there are some suspected issues and declines with local populations. Also, we have received reports from concerned fishermen where they used to catch thousands of turtles in a certain area and are now only catching them by the handfuls. And so that indicates could be declines in local populations. Okay, as I mentioned before, we have 2 commercial licenses specifically related to reptile and amphibians. The collector's license, the wholesale retail dealer's license. That collector's license has never had a reporting requirement associated with it. The wholesale retail dealer's license, we began requiring mandatory reporting in 2016, but those reporting requirements are insufficient for monitoring, proper monitoring and reporting and enforcement, and that's through our trip ticket process. There's an other turtles category, so we don't know with those numbers, we don't know what species those are, and in all cases, there's not any specific location information. So we don't know where these turtles have been pulled from, what waterways, and then also some data is reported by the pound. So we don't really know what number of individuals that equates to, and again, we don't know where those were pulled from. And then for recreational collection of native reptiles and amphibians, we do require a basic fishing license. Okay, so moving on to our non-native reptile and amphibian species and our restricted snakes. There's 103 established non-native species in the U.S. 64 are established in Florida, and 8 are established here in Louisiana. Sighting reports of tegus, monitor lizards, iguanas, and pythons have been increasing in the past couple of years. These are some examples of sighting reports that we've received. The 2 photos on the left are of an Argentine black and white tegu. Those species have been established in Florida and are wreaking havoc on native wildlife. They're opportunistic predators, and they will eat anything that they can get their mouths on.
Okay, so this part is absolutely true. The part about tegus being opportunistic predators and eating anything, I often describe my tegu, Chili, as a garbage disposal because she will eat pretty much anything. Any animals, any plants, any fruit, any vegetables. She is not picky. However, there's a reason this is happening in Florida, particularly, as opposed to here in Louisiana. And we will get into that a little bit later when I discuss the specific differences between the tegu ownership here in Louisiana and in Florida.
And they really have moved north and toward the Panhandle. They're now in Georgia, established. The state agency there is trying to control those species in the state. They do prey on gopher tortoise juveniles. They'll eat the eggs of gopher tortoises, which is a federally threatened species. And now South Carolina has documented them in 13 counties. And so they really are moving out from Florida. And because we are at a similar latitude, our habitats are similar. If they can survive in the Panhandle of Florida and north, then they can survive here in Louisiana.
Okay, so let's talk about Florida, America's hidden tropical oasis. Okay, realistically, Florida is in a very unique position because it is in the southernmost part of the country for the most part, and also the very southern tip of Florida and the Keys particularly are in an area that really doesn't get cold and is tropical. And reptile keepers there have the unique opportunity of keeping some of these reptiles outside year-round, and this is beneficial to the reptile and the keeper because they have access to the natural sunlight radiation, the UVB rays from the sun, rather than paying for expensive light bulbs like keepers elsewhere would have to do for their collection. So because of that, a lot of big breeders of tegus and other similar species were, and I say were because tegus are now banned in Florida, attracted to Florida as a place for raising these reptiles. So because of this, there were a lot of larger scale reptile breeders, tegu breeders, and even some snake breeders that gravitated to that area. So there were already a larger amount of tegus and a larger amount of reptiles in Florida being kept and bred than in other places in the United States, such as here in Louisiana, just simply because of the climate. The climate was desirable to the animals and to the keepers and to the breeders. Florida is also, as a lot of you know, the place in the country most prone to being hit by hurricanes. Florida actually has the highest number of hurricanes in the U.S., with 120 hurricanes making landfall in Florida, or 40.4% of all U.S. hurricanes. And I don't just mean hit by hurricanes, I mean hit by hurricanes that can actually cause some damage, whether that be structural damage, land damage, whatever, kind of damage that might be. That being said, whenever a lot of these reptile breeders are hit by hurricanes, and they do not take the precautions to pick up their animals or evacuate with them or whatever that might be, these animals often get loose. So this puts Florida in the perfect position to have tons of reptiles flocking there, or reptile keepers flocking there because of the great environment for these animals, than to have tons of these breeders and keepers losing these animals because of the weather conditions when it comes to hurricane season. Now, I'm in South Louisiana. I'm also used to hurricanes, but we definitely are not in a position where I could keep my tegus outside year-round. And I say tegus, I only have one. She's just a pet. I don't breed tegus, but she's an excellent pet. That being said, can tegus survive freezing temperatures? Absolutely they can. That was actually proven by a study done in Alabama. But are we in an optimal position like South Florida for keeping them outside year-round? No, we're not. And so most of your responsible breeders are not going to have, 24/7 outdoor setups without some sort of extremely secure, heated environment or something along those lines. But the ones in Louisiana just are not outside like they are in Florida, especially in big breeding groups, which is the perfect setup for an ecological disaster if they do happen to escape. So what I'm getting to with all of this is that Louisiana keepers are not as likely to keep their tegus out year-round, and even if they do keep them outside during the summer, they're used to having to bring them in for weather conditions in the winter, so therefore they probably have a way to pick them up if a hurricane's coming. There also just aren't the same amount of breeders and keepers as there were in Florida, and there just won't be. We would have to have way more tegu breeders and way more tegu owners have tegus, have them get loose for whatever XYZ reason, then have these tegus meet with each other, to then start to even consider establishing a wild population here. In Florida, it was different. Like I said, there were a lot more tegu breeders, therefore a lot more tegus that are already in pre-established breeding groups, meeting in this tropical environment that kind of gave them the recipe for the tegus for a perfect situation, for the environment, an ecological disaster. Are there reports of tegus being found in other states such as Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina? Yes, absolutely. Now, I think it's still undetermined as to if there are actual populations being established there, but however, for argument's sake, let's say there are. These aren't new populations that are being distributed into the wild from captive keepers. These are just animals from the original Florida population that are spreading out. So prohibiting keepers from obtaining these animals with intentions on keeping them properly is going to do absolutely nothing to stop this current spread of tegus that are invasive to Florida and then spreading beyond. And I know I'm speaking a lot on tegus here, and they definitely aren't the only species at risk of being banned in Louisiana. That's what I know best, and the same situation goes for a lot of these animals. So you could use the same arguments for savanna monitors. You could use the same arguments for Nile monitors. A lot of this that's happening in Florida just isn't going to happen here. It would be environmentally and situationally just extremely unlikely. I'm not even really going to get into the venomous snake keeping because I simply am not a venomous snake keeper. I don't intend on being a venomous snake keeper, and I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong. I just don't know enough about the current regulations and the current rules on keeping venomous animals. So I will leave that argument to people who are more educated on this topic to be able to speak out on. But just know that that also is one of the regulations that will be discussed coming up shortly. Also, when it comes to the regulation changes on harvesting wildlife, like harvesting wild turtles and things like that, honestly, I personally don't see any issues with that. I am all about protecting native wildlife and native species, so I'm just going to skip this section entirely so that this video isn't, 3 hours long. But if you are interested in learning about the proposed changes to collecting native wildlife, you can see it on the link, which will be in the description, or at the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries website. They have the full meeting there for you to see all of the proposed changes. All right, let's let her continue.
Those two pictures on the right are of a now monitor and savanna monitor. The top right picture is actually was reported as a nuisance alligator. And when the nuisance alligator hunters got out there, they found this and then they sent it to us for an ID, and it's actually a savanna monitor, which those have been established in Florida as well, the monitor lizards. And they're the same opportunistic predators and wreaking havoc on native wildlife. Okay, and so I just wanted to mention, like I said, southeastern states are dealing with this. They have implemented regulations to control the importation and possession of these species due to the public safety risk and also risk of establishment in the wild. The Burmese python, as y'all know or may have heard, Florida, it is a huge problem, and they are moving north from the southern peninsula.
Okay, not to keep on this same train forever, but the Burmese python problem in Florida is a really big problem. No one's denying that. However, this was directly traced back to Hurricane Andrew in 1992, I believe, where a few large breeding facilities were completely destroyed. Several animals got out from these facilities and were able to establish a population there in Florida. However, restricting current breeders and even just current casual owners from owning Burmese pythons, this is not going to do anything when it comes to the current situation and the current established population, because these animals are not continuously being introduced. They are established. They've been established. This has been going on for over 30 years. So banning new responsible reptile keepers is not going to do anything to make a difference.
Also, the photos on the left are of boa constrictors that have been reported in Louisiana. The Jesus Christ lizard in the picture in the center, though about 10 of those have been reported at Kisatchie National Forest by the staff there, U.S. Forest Service staff. We've had several reports of green iguanas in Louisiana, cocodrie, North Shore Lake Pontchartrain. We've tried to get with NUCOs, nuisance wildlife control operators, to help catch them before they escape. And so we've had multiple reports of iguanas. Also, the top right photo is a monocoque cobra. These highly venomous species, we really don't want to have to deal with. Our biological and enforcement staff had to go and retrieve that animal in the top right picture. And we really don't want to put staff in that risk. They're highly venomous, they're fatal, and also there's no anti-venom. And so I know our staff do not want to have to be put in a situation like that. And same for me. Okay, now we'll move into our non-native amphibian and reptiles and all venomous snake proposed regulation changes. Okay, we currently issue restricted snake permits for any constrictor snake over 8 feet in length and all venomous snake species. We are changing the minimum length requirement here to 8 feet, and that's to be consistent with our statutes in Title 56. In the next few slides, I'll provide you with a list of proposed prohibited species and restricted snakes. Okay, and here we're closing a loophole and adding clarity to the permitting language to make it more efficient to monitor and enforce. Moving forward, a restricted snake permit will be needed prior to acquiring any restricted snakes. We've added a license requirement that is currently listed in our statutes in Title 56, which has not been previously implemented. for folks breeding restricted snakes to better monitor what commercial activity is going on. Okay, so this rule prohibits the importation, possession, sale, transfer, release, and reproduction for the species listed here due to the significant threat they pose to the public and to our natural resources via risk of establishment in the wild. I wanted to mention that although all crocodilians is listed here, this does not include the American alligator, as they have their own set of regulations in Title 76. Folks possessing any of these species would have 120 days from the effective date of this rule to register those animals with the department and become permitted for the life of those animals. The photo shown here is of a Nile crocodile that was reported as a nuisance alligator just 3 weeks ago. And when the nuisance wildlife trapper arrived and found this Nile crocodile. So we really, these can be very aggressive, and we really want to prohibit the prevalence of this species in the state and the other species listed on the slide. Okay, these permits shall be renewed every 2 years, and persons or businesses in possession of prohibited species for commercial sale shall have 120 days to sell their said inventory or surrender those animals to the department. Okay, this rule is requiring folks in possession of non-native species listed here to acquire a permit to be monitored by the department. Folks in possession shall have, again, 120 days from the effective date of this rule to register those animals with the department. And again, we've added a statement regarding the injurious wildlife regulation under the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Lacey Act. And under our violation section here, we did add some language to put the responsibility on the owner for any expenses associated with an escaped pet. Okay, and if this NOI is approved, it would publish in the January 2024 State Register, and public comment period would be open through March 5th, 2024. And here's my contact information for the public comment period. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, so let's discuss a few things. Number one, all crocodilians. I think most reptile keepers would be in agreement that we don't need to own crocodilians, especially things like Nile crocodiles, really big crocodilians like that. I know there's been a lot of jokes about Nile crocodiles lately and people selling them at reptile shows, but in reality, I believe that most logical and responsible reptile keepers would all be in agreement that no normal person needs to keep a Nile crocodile for really any reason, and this should be reserved for like zoological facilities, if even that. We can discuss potentially having an exception for things like dwarf caiman, Cuvier's caiman, much smaller crocodilians that would be much more manageable for a, still very experienced reptile keeper, but for somebody who may not have a zoological facility or USDA, permanent facility or something like that. But I think most people would still be okay with maybe even there being some sort of permit process for these smaller crocodilians and not an outright ban. But that's something we can discuss. There might be some wiggle room there and maybe some give and take. Bullet number 2 is the main topic of this video for me personally anyways, and the one that I think most responsible reptile keepers will be negatively affected by, and that is the outright ban of owning any kind of tegu. So this is Argentine black and white tegus, Argentine red tegus like I have, and any combination thereof, because there are some that you hybridize between black and whites and reds and things like that to make some specialty colors. We discussed why this really wouldn't make much of a difference banning responsible tegu owners for things that happen states away in a completely different area. Because like I said, a lot of this started after Hurricane Andrew in 1992. So this was a long time ago. I'm not saying every animal that is now has an established population in the Everglades or in Florida or wherever happened, that long ago, but the majority of them, this has been going on for a long time and isn't something new. And I understand the need to want to be able to do something to help. I just don't personally see how the outright ban of responsible ownership of these animals in this area with keepers that are educated on their needs, their habitat, their containment, it's really going to make a difference to anybody except for those keepers who love these animals, because they're not going out in the wild, they're not going to be out in the wild, and they're not going to be detrimental to the environment. So And a lot of this can be said for Nile monitors, phantom monitors, even iguanas. A responsible owner's animal is not going to end up out in the wild. It's just not. They're going to have proper containment. And so if maybe, to kind of meet in the middle, there needs to be some sort of, I hate to even put this out there, but permit system to where, these animals are maybe a little bit harder to obtain because you have to go through a little bit of hoops and jumps to be able to legally own the animal. That's something that can be discussed, but at least they wouldn't be outright banned and be unable to be owned by people who really enjoy keeping them and working with them and who really love these animals. Now, there already are some restrictions that I think are just being tightened up about owning snakes over 8 feet. Honestly, I'm cool with that. I know a lot of people are not cool with that. People impulse buy Burmese pythons, reticulated pythons, things like that, because they're pretty cheap as babies, especially at reptile shows. You can get them for $100, $200, and they grow to, 15, 16, 17, 18 feet or more pretty quickly, in the scheme of things. So I do think it would be somewhat beneficial to have them a little bit I do think it would be beneficial to have a little bit more restrictions on ownership there for the snake's sake, because honestly, they're the one that's going to suffer in the end if they end up in the hands of somebody who is not prepared for what they will eventually grow to, because we want our animals to be healthy and happy, and this just isn't possible for everybody in their current setup and situation to house a, 15, 16, 17-foot snake. And not to ignore the amphibians on this list, I'm sure there are a lot of great keepers for African clawed frogs, Cuban tree frogs, things like that. I just don't think it's going to make as big of a deal to reptile and amphibian keepers for those specific species. However, I don't like seeing the outlaw of any species that is potentially harmless if the people who are owning it, for the most part, are responsible. And again, I'm not really going to get into venomous snakes too much, but honestly, she makes a really good point here. If a monocle cobra, king cobra, gaboon viper, whatever you might have, would happen to get out, and the Wildlife and Fisheries agent would have to be the one that is called in to take care of this, they're probably not trained to handle a gaboon viper or whatever the creature might be, and they may not have access to the antivenom. So it really is a risk to the Wildlife and Fisheries agent here. So that is something to really heavily consider. Now, again, I'm not familiar with the current laws. Are they enough? I really don't know. So that will be a discussion for venomous keepers to be able to enlighten us more about. Okay, so this is where her original presentation ends, and she's about to go into a Q&A portion with some of the other Wildlife and Fisheries committee members who sit on the board. When I tell you the comments that these men are about to make are so incredibly disheartening and frustrating and uneducated and just downright disgusting, that these are the men that are going to be making laws for reptile keepers. And honestly, it seems like they just hate reptiles. And you'll hear it for yourself, but it gets bad. It gets pretty bad. And they honestly seem to almost ignore completely the message of Miss Carrie Lejeune's proposal altogether, which is to protect native species, because they don't ask any questions about that. In fact, one of their questions specifically involves killing lots of native reptiles, which you will see. But these guys are more concerned with not seeing reptiles at all than protecting native species, which is what her whole proposal is all about. So I feel bad for her in this situation, being basically talked over by these men who aren't even really paying attention to what she's trying to say and what she's trying to do, and are asking off-the-wall questions that are, in my opinion, completely irrelevant to this situation.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for the presentation. I have a question. I don't know if it was addressed. If you have a possession permit, are you allowed to have that animal in the public, or can it only be within the owner's residence or commercial operation?
The current regulations just apply to just in possession in general. So we don't have any restrictions of where you can have that animal. But we do just have in possession. Anything over the limit that we're proposing here, or folks that are in possession of those prohibited species would need to be permitted. And that's so that we can monitor who has these animals. And then also once those animals expire, then we could be sure that they don't acquire any new individuals. Mm-hmm.
All right, I know we just got started, but let's pause real quick. A couple of things. First off, this guy, you'll see, he goes off about these animals being in public, like he walks around Target and there's just a snake everywhere he turns, and he's just absolutely disgusted by it. But you'll hear more from him, trust me. I do appreciate that in her proposal, let's just say, worst case scenario, this thing gets passed, tegus are banned. I won't have to give up my beloved tegu chili. She'll get to stay with me for the rest of her life. I'll just have to get a permit, register her, register myself as her owner, and, notify them whenever she does eventually die, hopefully of old age, many, many years from now. That being said, a comment she says is that, and make sure they don't get any more. What does that mean exactly? Am I going to be open to wildlife and fisheries to come examine my property and my home at any time? How do I trust that, even if this would happen, and even if I would allow it, how do I trust that whatever wildlife and fisheries agent decides to come doesn't see my bearded dragon or my blue-tongued skink, two other lizards I have, and be like, oh, there's one of those tegus, and put a nail gun through its head like what happened in Florida with the red-tailed boa? Because we know that everybody can't be an expert on every species, and we know that wildlife and fisheries agents aren't always the most reliable when it comes to identifying these animals.
Would y'all consider putting a restriction on having those animals in the public? And I'll tell the permitted animals, and I'll tell you the reason why. In the city of New Orleans, we've been having trouble with people having these snakes and reptiles on Bourbon Street and in other, and they're taking pictures with them and all of that kind of stuff, and it's a big problem. And I really had a feeling that this might have been because of some issues that the department has helped the city of New Orleans with. I would like to have restrictions on that type of activity added into this NOI.
Okay, so he is saying there is a, quote, big problem. This is becoming a big problem, quote, on Bourbon Street in New Orleans, that these reptiles are there, people are holding them, taking pictures, etc., etc. Listen, I would never be the person who's standing on the side of the road trying to get drunk tourists to pay me $5 to hold my snake. That's just not what I'm doing. Do I think it's right? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Depends on how the snake's being kept and handled, and, the conditions and what's going on. The whole snakes being like a sideshow gig, it's a whole questionable situation. That being said, are you going to do the same for parrots? I know we don't personally have primates here in Louisiana, but a lot of places do. They do it with monkeys. They do it with a lot of animals. Heck, there are dogs and cats that people take pictures with out there in New Orleans. Is this going to apply to all animals being used on the side of the road as street acts, or is this just reptiles? Because it seems like this guy just specifically has a problem with reptiles. I personally have taken my reptiles to our local children's museum, to art festivals, to a lot of different locations where I do educational events and I bring my animals out. People do meet them, they hold them, they interact with them, they learn from them. This is something I love doing. Would I be able to continue to do these educational events and classes if these bans would pass, or would this be something that would be completely outlawed as well? It seems to me that if this is truly an issue on Bourbon or New Orleans or wherever, that this is more of a parish issue, and that the parish should maybe be making these people get permits, but not for owning the reptile, for commercial purposes of making money on the streets of their parish. That can be solved this way.
Yes, and I will say we have had reports from the New Orleans area recently and other areas with concerns for folks having these species out. And we do have some language. I will check on that for the non-natives. We do have language where folks possessing species will have to get a permit from us. We do require, in some instances, only for certain exhibition purposes or for educational purposes. But if we will definitely be open to addressing that.
And I'm going to ask that we make that amend it today, so that if we do move this forward, favorably that it has that type of language and allow the department to make that language, to write that language to add into it.
I would just like to add just one thing, Commissioner Cesari, in regards to that. I know we've had some discussion about in the ongoing issues that are being had. I also think it's important for the city to also pass some ordinances that would prevent that kind of activity so that they can enforce some of the things that they're wanting the department to handle. So just want to make you and I have on the same page with that.
Cole, you wanted to say something?
I just wanted clarification on the proposed amendment, the conceptual proposed amendment that would prohibit a person in possession of the permit from exhibiting the animal outside of their home, a facility,
Public exhibition. I mean, they could have a permit allowed for a specific event to do it, and I think that's allowed with a special permit. But this would be outside of the commercial activity or their home, so that it's not allowed to be in the public.
And the other question I have is, you want that to that provision to extend only to non-native species, to native species, to both reptiles, amphibians?
To both and all.
Okay.
Yeah, and I believe we already have that language for our native species. We have that already, but we certainly could add some language for non-natives. I think that would be important.
Okay.
I know she's probably just agreeing with these guys just to appease them, but what they're saying is they don't want to see any native or non-native reptiles anywhere out in public. This is really confusing to me because, like, does this mean I can't even take my bearded dragon to PetSmart? Because last year for his birthday, we took him to PetSmart. We let him pick out a few things. It was a great time. Everything was responsibly done. Does this mean that would be outlawed? I don't know. It's just odd that these people who sit on the board of wildlife and fisheries, seems to me like they don't want to see reptiles at all anywhere, native or non-native. And it gets worse. It gets worse.
I appreciate the clarification.
I have some questions.
Thank you.
First of all, and just to make sure I understand, I think we had a discussion on the phone yesterday, but on these pages aren't numbered, but 1, 2, 3, 4, and it looks like it's under E3. It says euthanizing of reptiles or amphibians shall be performed humanely following the Veterinary Medical Association guidelines. I just want to make sure that that applies to in captivity, not my wife walking outside with her 20 gauge.
Right. Yes, that applies.
I guarantee her 20 gauge is not approved by the veterinarians.
Yes, that does apply just to captive husbandry and folks that have these animals.
Okay, so this guy's first question is it still going to be okay for my wife to walk outside with a shotgun and shoot a snake if she sees one? Is that really his first question? And we're talking about preserving native wildlife, but he still wants to make sure it's okay for his wife to go shoot a snake with a shotgun, right?
The other one is, and apparently Lake Providence is an anomaly in this issue, but, you know, when I was a little kid, apparently the snake rodeos were a big deal where they go out and, you know, collect the snakes and have a big deal about it. And then about 20 years ago, we had a sheriff that came back and started doing it again. And then our current sheriff has done it some years yes, some years no. And I was trying to find that provision here. Let's see.
Yes, yeah, and I'll try to find it. I can try to go back here to it as well.
It's not page numbered, but
I may have apologize. I may have accidentally slipped over that. So here it is at the bottom of this slide 3.
Yeah. Okay, so it's organized events that wanton or willfully waste native amphibians. What is wanton and willful waste? Because, you know, they have a biologist there. It's very organized, which I see you say organized, but they have a biologist counting them, identifying what they are. is that, so y'all are trying to exclude that?
Right. Yes. So we and we're aware of that incident. And so I've seen the data from the snakes that have been killed during those events. The majority of them are water snakes, not cottonmouths or water moccasins. Understand the fear of snakes of folks, but they're water snakes, and so they're harmless. They're non-venomous. They eat diseased fish, so they're really good for those ecosystems. And so we really, in being in line too with other states, with the rattlesnake roundups being converted to like wildlife friendly festivals, we really just wanted to add a statement here prohibiting that type of activity. I mean, it's more morally and ethically just going out and killing these animals, and that's what we mean by that. So the intent to kill, not to consume, but just to waste those animals every year. So that's why we've added that language in there. We've tried to get some education out there, and we'll continue to do so.
Yes, 100% yes. These events are terrible. They're horrible. I've seen pictures. They literally just go out into the lake or to this area, find as many snakes as they can, and kill them for no reason. These are our native animals. These animals are important to the environment. And like she said, not that it even matters, because honestly, native venomous animals shouldn't be killed just for the sake of existing either. But the majority of these animals are completely harmless. So you're going to tell me that this guy's biggest problem with this proposed bill is that he can't continue to go out and kill hundreds of native animals just because they exist in this random little town that has a weird tradition of going out and killing snakes for fun? Come on.
Would anybody ever eat a water snake? I mean, is there ever anyone that would ever eat one?
Not that I'm aware of.
So the only way to do it is, it's a real problem. I mean, that they're all over your lake bank, the dock, that you step outside. And I'm telling you, your relatives that come in for the 4th of July, they don't care what kind of snake it is. Your wife doesn't care if it's in the flower bed, what kind it is. And we see a huge population of these things when we're not controlling them in that manner. I don't know how better well suited. I mean, you can call it what you want, but when you have it organized and there's a biologist there, it seems like to me for the local population, and it's very popular. It's not, well, yeah, there's a lot of people that like doing it. I'm not one of them because I'm not putting a dead or alive snake in the boat with me. But but certainly the residents living around the lake, I mean, they want it to happen. They ask for it. They're mad at the sheriff when he doesn't do it. And so I'm a little I don't want to do something that the department does not want, but I can't vote for this because I can't go home and tell people that I voted for this because of that provision. Because when I get asked why they can't do it anymore, I want to be at least to be able to say I didn't vote for it.
So you are telling me that this man doesn't want this tradition to end because he doesn't want to see water snakes at the boat launch? Are you kidding me? That is where they live. They live near and around the water. Of course they're going to be at the boat launch. You go launch your boat in places where, fishing and wildlife are abundant. So they're going to be there. Who cares if you see a snake in your yard during the 4th of July? Your family's either from Louisiana and should also be willing to see, reptiles and amphibians because, for God's sake, we have a ton of them here and they need to learn about their native wildlife. Or if they're not from the area, you should use this as a teaching opportunity to your wife in her flower bed to teach them that, what this animal is and why it's here and why it's not dangerous. And the scariest part of all of this is that these are the people who have our passion and our hobby in their hands. The future of our reptile keeping is in the hands of these people that apparently hate reptiles and don't want to see a snake in their yard. And of course, I'm not talking about Carrie here. I actually really agree with Carrie's mission and her end goal, and to protect the native wildlife. And I don't think she shares these opinions because obviously she's trying to put an end to them. But she's not the only one that's going to be voting on this. It's these guys too. And I truly think that Carrie has an excellent vision in mind, and everything she's saying about protecting the natives is true. We do need to protect our natives. It's just the execution and how we get there that we need to work on coming to a reasonable solution for everyone.
And of course I'd offer an amendment to take that out. I just hate to see, if it's a problem in other parts of the state and it's something that needs to happen, and I'm not saying that we do it every year, but it is an important part of our culture. Right?
Joe?
I guess he raised a question. I hadn't caught that provision. If I kill a water snake, am I subject and leave it laying there? Am I subject to be fined? Or?
No, sir.
This is an organized.
This is
they're trying the way we've done it in the past.
They targeted y'all.
Yeah, it's hard.
This is really just targeted to mass killing events, wanton waste of native.
And apparently we're the only ones that do it anymore. Maybe do y'all ever remember doing that when you were kids? Right? Yeah, apparently we're the only ones. But anyway, if the commission, I don't want to go against the department if this is something that y'all really feel strongly about, and offer that amendment. And I certainly don't want to put my fellow commissioners in that position where they're just singling out one little lake body of Northeast Louisiana that apparently doesn't even get a circle on maps. But anyway, so I will let you know, I'm all for this stuff. I'm with Al on the snakes on the streets and all that too, but I can't go home and say I voted for this. I'm sorry.
So this is really the only part of the bill that I'm really hoping does pass, and this guy's all saying, oh, maybe this isn't a problem elsewhere, maybe we're the only ones to do this, I wonder why we're the only ones to do this. That's because animals being in their natural environment typically are not a problem, especially snakes, which are completely harmless. These snakes are harmless. There's nothing they can do to harm a person. Existing isn't harmful.
I'd like to move favorable.
Wait, I just want to, I think I would be, it wouldn't be right if I didn't thank the Department of Wildlife Enforcement Division for helping the city of New Orleans recently in dealing with this issue, because they really don't have a concept of how to deal with it. And our biologists and enforcement people showed up there, and their knowledge was so much better. And the way that they acted at this meeting, where they had federal and state agencies, numerous, they were exemplary.
And I just wanted to add real quick on that note. I know the difference between in discussing the rodeo versus what's happening in New Orleans is we're talking about our native resources. I just wanted to clarify that versus these non-native species that folks have in possession. So, the situation in New Orleans.
You want to say something? Okay. All right. We got a motion by Joe to go ahead and move to adopt the NOI as presented. I need a second.
Just to be clear, I think you wanted to include Commissioner Senseri's amendment, or no?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So to restate the motion, it's to adopt the notice of intent as amended, with inclusion of a prohibition of exhibition of these permitted reptiles and amphibians.
I think that Joe put this together to amend to require permit under the guidelines for public exhibition.
Okay.
All right. We got a first by Joe. We need a second.
I'll second.
No, you'll second the motion? Okay. We're not gonna ask for a vote. We got public comment right now. So we're gonna start off with Corey Hillard.
Hi, I'm CJ. I've lived currently in Mississippi, but my family has been in Louisiana the last 20, 30 years. I'd like to start by thank you, Carrie. That was pretty great. I fully support everything within her proposal. I definitely would love to see turtles get more protections, more restrictions on take, on harvest, especially the alligator snapping turtles. It's so difficult to actually find large turtles. because they grow so slow. A lot of these big turtles that everyone loves and sees are older than probably everyone in here. They reach 80 years old, and the harvest is just simply not letting them get to that point. I'd even love and fully support if we can go a step further and create some kind of season so that maybe gravid females can't be removed, can't be harvested, just to give them a little bit better way for recovery, just as we're trying to do with the redfish and the crappie and all these other sport fish that we're trying to see. Alligator snapping turtles are a huge cultural part of Louisiana, and I'd love to see them make a full recovery, stay within the state, and continue to be that cultural recovery. And then I guess another hot topic, the Lake Providence Snake Rodeo. I personally see it as a truly horrific thing for a sheriff's department or a Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries Commission to advocate for or support. The killing of native wildlife, regardless of the species or what they do. They are native wildlife. They do belong there. They do deserve to be there. They are mostly harmless. I know it's like 90% or more harmless water snakes. I see it as truly horrible to condone that kind of activity as the guise of a conservation agency and a wildlife fisheries agency. With that, thank you, and thank you, Carrie.
Yeah, so this first commenter has some really good points. Everything he's saying about, collecting the turtles, harvesting them from the wild, I don't disagree with any of that. Again, I know I'm mostly focusing on the non-native reptile keeper situation via this bill, but he didn't speak on that. I guess he's not a reptile keeper, which is totally fine. I understand most people are not reptile keepers. But yeah, I mean, this bill has a lot of great things. It just also has a few really terrible things for reptile keepers. I totally agree with his sentiment on the rodeo, the snake roundup. I'm sure a lot of you do too, but you'll see that our board member here, who's from Lake Providence and supports the rodeo and enjoys this type of thing, is going to get a little bit aggravated with everybody disagreeing with him.
Next, we have Micaiah Savali.
Hi, y'all. My name's Micah Cephalou. I'm from Goodby, Louisiana. I am an avid naturalist and amateur photographer, and I have to support everything that's being presented here. That these are all common sense regulations. I have an affinity for reptiles and amphibians. I relocate them from time to time. I think we do have somewhat of an issue, possibly with invasives and from other places. I have relocated a ball python from an abandoned property in Abita. Well, it was actually an open house where they were showing it, and there was a ball python that was running through the garage and had everybody, obviously they were all over the place until I got there. Yeah, I'm not much on speaking.
Right.
But anyway, I have to agree with everything, and I would like to comment on Lake Providence Rodeo. I think that's a little abhorrent too, that goes on in 2023. I think that things like that promote the wrong ideas, and they're really just not a good thing for the environment, because snakes are an important part of the ecosystem. And really the ones that you're seeing they're not all over the lake. The ones that you're seeing around the lake, that they're on the shore, they don't live in the middle of the lake. The shore is their habitat. So, that's why you run into them on the shore. So, I guess that's about all I have to say.
Okay, this was actually pretty funny. I do like how he's like, yeah, of course you're seeing snakes along the shore. They don't live in the middle of the lake. They live on the shore near the water, not in the water. That was pretty funny. I'll make a quick comment on his comment about the invasives. Like, he mentioned removing a ball python from a house. I don't think anybody's claiming that there are invasive ball pythons. So this isn't a case of invasive species. This is a case of either escaped or released pets, which I know, a lot of people are saying, well, that's what leads to invasive species. And in some cases, yeah, sure, it might. But the majority of the problems we're having with invasive species, stem from much bigger situations than just somebody's single ball python accidentally getting out, or whatever the case might be.
Any questions? Thank you for your response. Next, we have Bradley Burton.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Commissioners. Thank you for the time to talk, and thank you, Carrie, for that great presentation. I also am in extreme support of the regulations proposed today. I think that the native reptile and amphibian diversity found within the state, like Carrie showed on the map, it is second to just one other region in the country or in the entire world. And I think that it's important for us to protect our natural resource as we do with all the other natural resources within the state. And I think that these regulations proposed do a good job of addressing a lot of the major issues that we have, especially with the non-native wildlife. We've seen, as in Florida, the havoc that those animals have wreaked throughout the ecosystem, and to proactively create regulations that would prohibit that from happening within Louisiana would be a very smart thing to do as we move forward. And then to echo what the last two folks have said, the number 3 there, the organized events to wantonly or willfully waste animals, I think it is important that we understand that all of our native wildlife is important and it serves a purpose within the ecosystem. And to have an event where we massacre animals for no apparent reason is unwise ecologically. And I think creating more regulations to end practices like that is a very smart move.
Any questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm not just going to go on and repeat myself here. I've made the points about, the regulations not necessarily being beneficial to protecting native wildlife. But the regulations specifically, are the ones that would ban, certain non-natives from being kept. I will just quickly point out before we continue that not 1, not 2, but 3 guys came up, discussed their disapproval of the snake roundups, and the commissioner has yet to make any comments directly to them. Let's see what happens next.
Next, we have Christina Trapani.
Hello, gentlemen, and thank you, Carrie, for your presentation. These proposed regulations are way long overdue. Reptiles and amphibians are a part of our Louisiana heritage and cannot be replaced. We have to start protecting and preserving these species. This is an excellent start. The roles of those animals have a very important part in nature, as important as the American alligator and the brown pelican. And I agree with these gentlemen over here about the rodeo status and Louisiana being the last to stop it, because other states have learned just how unnecessary and ridiculous those kind of events are. So please take that into consideration. Thank you.
And I take exception to people calling me ridiculous and the people in my town ridiculous. We feel that it does serve a purpose, and I know that we may not agree, but we could use better terminology. I have not made fun of anyone. I have not talked poorly of anyone. I've just stated what we do and why.
I absolutely agree, and it was not a direct
that I spend my life with being called ridiculous. Okay, I take offense to that.
Okay, so maybe it's just by virtue of her being the 4th speaker to come up and make public comments, but it's just a little noticeable to me that the first person he decides to have a little bit of confrontation with, and who he claims offended him, is the only woman that is coming up and making comments about, the roundups being, quote, ridiculous, quote, and offending him and his, the people he grew up with. Just because you grew up with people that do a certain thing, and just because you grew up doing a certain thing, doesn't mean it's a good thing. There are plenty of traditions that we've established over the course of the history of this state and this country and this world even, that we've come to realize are not good traditions. But it's just funny to me that all of a sudden this woman comes up and says not that these people are ridiculous, but that these events are ridiculous, and all of a sudden Peepaw's got his feelings hurt because this mean lady decided to say that killing native wildlife doesn't actually help native wildlife.
I understand, and I apologize that you take offense, and I did not mean it in an ugly way. It was just the word that came out.
I'm sorry. Apology accepted.
Thank you.
All right, so there it is. That is the entirety of the meeting with the relevant portions to the changes for non-native reptile keeping and the proposed banned species, including tegu, savanna monitors, things like that. So what can we do at this point? They are accepting comments until Wednesday, March 6th, and comments can be submitted by email to klejeune, LEJEUNE, at wlf.la.gov, or you can send them by mail. I will include the link to USARK, and if you're not familiar with USARK, they are the United States Association of Reptile Keepers, and their main goal is to fight against these type of regulations for reptile keepers. They're a pretty powerful organization, and I know they're trying to help with this, so anything we can do to support them supporting us would be beneficial to all reptile keepers in Louisiana. They also have a sample email if you're not, the best with words or you don't really know what to say. They have an email that you can copy and paste, change a few things to send directly to her without having to actually write up anything. I think the main point of this video should be that I would say the vast majority of reptile keepers in Louisiana, myself included, actually have the same views and the same opinions on protecting native wildlife that Miss Carrie Lejeune has. And we would love, to have more protections for turtles and native animals and snakes and stop things like the snake roundup in Lake Providence. However, we just have some really valid concerns about the restrictions on keeping our pets and what good banning our pets would actually have in an ecological sense on the overall environment down here. I think we just need to work together, maybe come up with some sort of middle ground to where we can have them, feel a little bit better about who's actually owning these animals, how they're keeping them, etc. And, ensure that these animals are not just going to start roaming free via the ones that are being kept legally here in Louisiana, and that current pet owners are not having any impact on the already established populations in Florida that may or may not be spreading to surrounding areas. So anything I state is mostly just the opinion of myself. I obviously cannot speak for all reptile keepers, but I've spoken with a lot of reptile keepers who keep some of these, soon to be outlawed species, and we're all pretty much on the same page here when it comes to agreeing with the overall goals of these bills that are trying to be passed, but just disagreeing with the execution of how they're going about it. What you can do to help, you obviously, like I mentioned, you can send a comment. Their comments are open until March 6th. I will put all relevant links to USARK, to the Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries full meeting, to the contact information for Carrie Lejeune, the board member who is putting together the proposal. I'll have everything linked down in any of the descriptions, anywhere this video is shared. If this is something that is interesting or affecting you as a pet owner or just reptile enthusiast, please share it. We need to get this out there because I think a lot of people are still in the dark as to what exactly is going on and what they're trying to actually do and why it's not actually, incredibly beneficial to ban some of these animals that a lot of people here in Louisiana really truly love. All right, and I'll go ahead and end it here. I know this is already long enough and it took forever to edit, but I just wanted to have a concise format for everybody to be able to see exactly what's going on. Please share this with your friends. Thank you so much for watching, and let's see what happens.